if there was ever a ship that could be described as a luck vampire even more than Prince Eugen, it was the Japanese destroyer Yukikaze. The Snowy Wind was a Kagero-class destroyer, the last major Japanese destroyer class that was completed before Japan's entry into World War II. She was laid down in August 1938, launched in March 1939, and commissioned toward the end of January 1940. Initially, her service was fairly run-of-the-mill, assisting in the invasions of the major Japanese targets in the Western Pacific, the Philippines to remove the USA's closest outpost, and the Dutch East Indies to get their hands on that sweet, sweet oil, as well as playing a minor part in the Battle of the Java Sea. Her presence at the Battle of Midway might be seen as an early manifestation of her curse, since she survived, but the Kido Butai did not. But as she was actually escorting the invasion force and not the carriers, we'll let this one slide. Likewise, although directly escorting the Japanese Navy's carriers at the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands, that one was at least a tactical Japanese Navy victory, even if a number of ships were badly hit, with of course Yukikaze surviving without a scratch. Rather, her particular curse of surviving whilst everything around her burned to the waterline really began to take hold during the Guadalcanal campaign, where she was assigned as part of the escort for the battle cruisers Hiei and Kirishima as they attempted to bombard Henderson Field. This, of course, led to the encounter with Admiral Callahan's cruiser and destroyer force, and here Yukikaze emerged unscathed from the battle, which claimed a number of other Japanese ships, including, in the end, Hiei. And she even had the USS Cushing and USS Laffey on her kill sheet, having either crippled or delivered the final blow to both destroyers, depending on which sources you read. Next, there was the Battle of the Bismarck Sea. 8 destroyers and the transports they were escorting went in, and all the transports and 4 of the destroyers were sunk, and of the 4 surviving ships, Yukikaze again emerged with little to show for the adventure outside of a somewhat depleted magazine and a wide collection of survivors from various ships. Next was the Battle of Colombaranga. Once again, Yukikaze emerged intact, and this time with another potential kill or crippling to her name, as her torpedoes were part of the massed wave which sank USS Gwin and badly damaged USS St. Louis and USS Honolulu. Whilst the battle was overall a Japanese win, the flagship, the light cruiser Jintsu, was also the only ship on the Japanese Navy side larger than a destroyer, and, yes, again, you guessed it, it was sunk. Presumably, Japanese High Command was beginning to notice a pattern, and Yukikaze was soon assigned a series of convoy escort missions well away from the front lines, which she duly protested by ramming a reef, inflicting the single greatest amount of damage thus far incurred by the ship, even if it was at her own hands. But, running short of ships, curse or not, the Japanese Navy put Yukikaze into action as part of the carrier escort for the Battle of the Philippine Sea, where she promptly got to watch Taiho, and then Shikaku, and then most of the rest of the ships around her go up in flames, and then go down to Davy Jones' locker, while she merrily collected another varied assortment of survivors, as the bombs fell close, but not close enough to damage her. And then it was on to the Battle of Leyte Gulf, specifically the Battle of Samar, where she managed to escort the Musashi, Atago, and Maya into destruction before they'd even got into battle. And then she went after Taffy 3. At this point, it should come as no surprise to you, dear listeners, that the Japanese Navy cruisers started exploding left, right, and centre, whilst Yukikaze herself went after the mighty USS Johnston, scoring a number of hits without, shockingly, taking any in return. Staging back home via Brunei, Yukikaze successfully escorted the battlecruiser Kongo and her own sister ship Urikaze into the path of waiting US submarines, before reaching Kure, missing those 2 ships. But Japan, despite Yukikaze's best efforts, still had some capital ships afloat, and so Yukikaze took the Shinano out for a quick hop to another port, and sure enough, shortly thereafter, Shinano was on the bottom, courtesy of USS Archerfish, and Yukikaze returned to port with an innocent smile and some more sailors plucked from the ocean's embrace. It must therefore have been with some trepidation that the crew of the Yamato, the last of her kind, saw Yukikaze form up as part of the escort for Operation Tengo, but hey, it was a suicide mission anyway, wasn't it? Well, that turned out to be sooner than you might expect, as Yukikaze completed her Yamato-class trifecta by safely bringing the last of the super battleships right into the path of her massive American air assault. As the battleship, the cruiser Yahagi, and half the escorting destroyers went under, Yukikaze, once more, returned home with more survivors and a small burst of machine gun fire showing that it was in fact possible for her to suffer damage at enemy hands, although whether this was all part of a cover story arranged with a nearby Hellcat pilot remains unconfirmed. With the war's end, less than a handful of the Japanese Navy's pre-war destroyers were still afloat, but Yukikaze was among them, having potentially quietly bumped off her only competition, Shigure, in early 1945 by going off for a brief period of training, a period in which Shigure took up convoy escort duty and ended up being sunk by USS Blackfin. With these being only the highlights of Yukikaze's wartime career, she was subsequently reassigned to the Republic of China in 1947 and renamed Danyang. Heavily refitted, she served in that navy until typhoon damage in 1969 saw her sold for scrap the following year. Although, given that her arrival in Republic of China service was followed shortly thereafter by them losing the entirety of southern China, apart from Taiwan, perhaps she was still carrying that curse with her, even under a new name.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.